With the release of Gladiator 2 this week, I wanted to stop and take a look back and rank the filmography of Sir Ridley Scott. Just a few things to get out of the way before we dive into it. I'm only going to be ranking the movies that I've seen. His filmography is pretty large. He's up there with like Spielberg and Scorsese and all them. Not quite that many, but he's up there. So I'm only going to be ranking the ones that I've actually seen. And there's probably 15 of them, 16, 17, something like that. Actually, I think that's the only rule I have this week for this. Okay, we're going worst to the best. So like and subscribe if you haven't. Hit the notification bell, and if you're new, check out the rest of the channel and let me know what you think. Let's dive into the ranking of Ridley Scott. Alright, we're kicking off the list with number 17, which is Hannibal. This is a unique one because I have seen this movie. I have. But it's been a very long time. I remember liking it. I remember not enjoying it as much as I did Silence of the Lambs. But to be honest, I don't remember too much about it. We have Julianne Moore taking over for Jodie Foster, which, Julianne Moore is a fantastic actress. She's up there, so I thought she was very good. Anthony Hopkins, obviously, always good. Creepy as hell in this movie and Silence of the Lambs, and I think he did one more Hannibal movie, Red Dragon. So yeah, he creepy in all of them. And honestly, the most memorable aspect of this film, which I think anyone who's seen it remembers, is the climax with Ray Liotta at the dinner and he cuts the top of his head off. So, it's a Hannibal Lecter movie, so there's that. But I couldn't put this any higher just looking at the rest of the movies, just because I've seen it like twice in my life, and the last time I saw it was probably, if I had to guess, 10 years ago. I really have to rewatch it. Maybe I'll do this ranking again sometime down the road after I rewatch this one, and maybe a few more movies from Ridley Scott that I haven't seen. But yeah, so kicking off the list with Hannibal. Coming in at number 16 is Napoleon. I know this movie has its fans. I am not one of them. There's actually a review for this movie I did on the channel, so you can go check that out. I was pretty low on this movie. I love Ridley Scott. He's one of my favorite directors, top 25 for sure. This movie, it's all over the place. It doesn't know what it wants to be. And one, it's just weird to watch, and two, it just derails the entire pacing of the film. If you've ever seen The Death of Stalin, which is a hilarious movie, it's all about the downfall of the Soviet Union, but it's a parody, so there's a lot of modern dialogue and modern acting, and there's not, you can tell it's a parody, but it's all set in this time period when Stalin was alive and the Soviet Union was thriving. This movie felt like that, but it also felt like it was trying not to be that. It didn't know if it wanted to be this serious biopic or this ridiculous parody, because Napoleon's just a goofball the entire movie. And Joaquin Phoenix is one of the best actors working today. Everyone knows that. But it's just it's all over the place. There's some parts you don't know if you're supposed to give your full attention to a scene and just completely lose yourself into the drama of it, or if you're just supposed to laugh, because there's multiple scenes in this movie where it could go honestly either way. And look, it's Ridley Scott, so the action sequences are epic, they're awesome, but it's just such a mess of a movie tonally. And another thing that drives me crazy, I know this isn't a huge issue for some people, but I despise when movies take place in a foreign country and the lead actor gets cast and just does American English accent. It drives me up a wall. It's like Tom Cruise and Valkyrie. I get it. It might seem like a small thing for someone else, but for me, it just takes me out of the movie. And so I can't do it. I despise this movie. Dropping in at number 16 is Kingdom of Heaven. Director's cut, regular cut, whatever you want. I know a lot of people say the director cut's better, and it is for sure, but both of the cuts to me are just not great. This movie's epic. It's got the classic Ridley Scott feel to it. You know, it's this big, sweeping, medieval epic. The action sequences are great. The sets are great. The scenery's great. You know, all of the classic Ridley stuff that he's known for it's phenomenal. Chef's kisses. Acting is incredible. But this movie is fucking boring. It's very boring. There's not a lot there is a lot that happens, but there's also not a lot that happens. It drags along for, what is this movie, like 3 hours almost? At least the director's cut is. It's just such a drag to get through. And you know, I saw this movie when I was a kid, because I think this came out when I was probably in like 7th grade, and I did not like it then. And now that I'm older, I'm like, you know, I was a teenager back then. Maybe I'll enjoy it more. I just recently watched the director's cut, like probably 3 months ago, and I was like, this is tough. It is tough to get through. The pacing is so bad. And it sucks because I think somewhere in here there is a good movie. You know, there's not a lot of movies out there about the Crusades, so it's an interesting topic for a director of his caliber to try and tackle and present to a mainstream audience. So, but I don't know. It's just, I know a lot of people who like it. It's just not for me. It's not a very entertaining film, unfortunately. At number 15 is Robin Hood. This is another one. It's just like, the pacing of this movie is horrendous. A lot of it is very boring. The action sequences are awesome, but again, that's just Ridley Scott. And God, the cast in this movie is incredible. I mean, you have Oscar Isaac, before anyone really knew who he was, just tearing it up. And of course, Russell Crowe, superstar, honestly. It's great. The cast is great. The look of the movie's great, but it's just boring, and it's not what you want a Robin Hood movie to be. I remember being so disappointed by this because I feel like cinema forever has been trying to tackle Robin Hood on the big screen, and it's only been done good twice, and I stand by that. The Disney Robin Hood from like the 50s or 60s, where Robin Hood is a fox. That movie's awesome. I used to watch it all the time when I was a kid. I've watched it with my son. And Men in Tights, one of the best parody comedies probably ever. That movie is hilarious. I still laugh my ass off to it to this day. Those are the two best Robin Hoods. And I remember when this came out, I saw it opening night in the theater. And I was like, Ridley Scott, Russell Crowe, they cannot fuck this up. And they fucked it up. It's just not very interesting. And it's just so meandering and boring. And it's just not what a Robin Hood movie is supposed to be. You know, it's not exciting. It's not compelling. It's just kind of bleh. In at number 13 is one of Scott's more recent films, House of Gucci. I like this movie. I think from this point on, you could say these are movies that I like. Like, I would revisit this. It wasn't my favorite, but I thought it was enjoyable enough. It's kind of humorous in like a dark comedy sort of way. The cast is phenomenal. I mean, you got Pacino, Adam Driver, who I would contend is one of the best actors working today. Lady Gaga, who's a phenomenal actress. I mean, after A Star Is Born, her career just took off, and deservedly so. Jeremy Irons, always just love when he pops up in stuff. I love Jeremy Irons. I feel like he's not in enough stuff in this day and age, and he deserves to be. And then you got Jared Leto. My God, I don't know how this guy keeps getting work. It's just like, you thought his career was over after Joker, and it's just not. They just keep letting him be in movies and doing these shitty, ridiculous performances, and he's awful in this. It's just like, everyone else is like acting, and he's just like fucking around cashing a paycheck. But I don't know, this movie's, there's some really fun parts of this movie. I mean, I think Driver and Gaga bounce well off each other. Their chemistry and, what develops into a, tumultuous relationship it's interesting to watch. Kind of the rise and fall of this family is interesting. I didn't know a lot about this going in, so that was new to me, which I found compelling. I don't know, biopics are hard, man, because there's a certain set of events it's mandated that you have to follow. Like, you're telling a true story, so you kind of have to follow a certain set of steps to tell the story, and so a lot of times it can be very predictable or just not even very interesting. But I found this one fun enough. It's not phenomenal, it's not one of Ridley's best, but I would probably watch it again. My favorite aspect of this was honestly the feel of it. I think Ridley pulls off the uber wealthy, glitz and glamour sort of lifestyle very well. It kind of reminds me a lot of like Wolf of Wall Street and what Scorsese did for that. It's kind of got the same kind of atmospheric vibe. And but again, it's one of those movies that, the pacing's kind of all over the place with this one as well. I would say in his later years, that's kind of Ridley's biggest issue. But, like I said, I would watch this one again. Next up at number 12 is the first of 3 Alien films on this list. And I would say one of the worst. I don't know. Look, I like most of the Alien films, almost all of them. I think 3 and Resurrection are awful. I don't really count the AVP ones because I think those are something totally different, just out of the scope of this entire franchise, in my opinion. I think Alien Covenant's entertaining. It's an entertaining movie. Would I say it's a good movie? Probably not. I enjoy it. I always like going into these Alien movies, even if they're not going to be great horror or even great philosophical contemplative films, just for the entertainment value. Watching people getting chased around by these disgusting, creepy ass, horrific alien creatures and just get absolutely decimated, that's enjoyable to me. I think most people, I don't know. There's a big cast in this one. I would argue too many. There's just the great thing about the original Alien, one, you're in a small condensed space and it makes for a great horror, and 2, you're dealing with it's a very small cast as well, so you can focus on all the characters involved. There's a lot of people in this movie. When I rewatched this year, I was just like, who the fuck is that? Who's that? And there's so many people that, like, a handful of them are just fodder. Like, they die within the first, 3 minutes of getting off the ship, and you're like, okay, well, I don't even remember what that person looked like. And then it's like, you have the cliffhanger in Prometheus with Shaw going off to try and find our creators with David, and then they just kind of scrapped that whole portion of the narrative. I mean, you see Shaw in one flashback, and then she's just dead, so yeah, that's cool. I guess that storyline just doesn't matter anymore. And then I don't know, I really like Naomi Rapace. I think she's a very underrated actress, and I wish they would have just brought her back for this. I don't love the main actress in this one. I can't even remember her name. But there are some great cast members in this, like Billy Crudup and then Danny McBride, who I never thought would be good in a serious movie like this, but he is. He's pretty awesome. Michael Fassbender, I mean, one of the GOATs working today in the film industry. He's fantastic in everything he does, and he plays an incredible android, and he does it twice in this film. It's incredible. But look, the cinematography's beautiful, the action's awesome, some of the horror elements are sweet. There's a lot of scientists in this movie doing dumb shit, just like they did in Prometheus, and we'll get to that later. It's higher on the list, but we'll get to it. They land on the planet and they just get off. There may have been a scene when they talked about the atmospheric pressure and oxygen levels and whatnot. There probably is. But still, even if you're getting off on a foreign planet that you know nothing about, you're not going to wear masks? You should have little hats on? Like, what if there is some sort of airborne virus? It doesn't make sense. This movie's fun to watch, but it's not very good. And there's a lot in this movie that's very easy to make fun of, which is not a good sign. In at number 11 is American Gangster. This is a biopic that I think is actually pretty good. I think the story's interesting, seeing the rise of Frank Lucas and how he just kind of took over Harlem and made it his own and operated this insanely successful heroin industry, and at points even revolutionized how drug dealers are able to smuggle drugs and do business, and he built an empire off of it. Now, I, to be honest, have not read a lot about this actual story, and I have heard recently that a lot of Frank and like the stories he's admitted to are very, very embellished. I don't know how true that is, but it makes for an interesting story in this movie, so that's what I'm going off of. I think Richie's character, played by Russell Crowe, is great. I mean, he's like this down on his luck, aspiring lawyer who's a detective, just can't catch a break, and he's like, I'm going to do everything in my power to get this guy, and I'm not going to stop until I do. And in the end, they sort of become friends, which is always fun to see. But the problem, again, with this movie, it's very enjoyable, and I think for a biopic, it's actually very good. The issue is, one, biopic, like I said, you kind of have to follow a certain line of events, so there's really no, like, surprises, especially if you know the story going in, you kind of know what to expect. And then number two, like, they try to make Richie likable, but there's a lot of points in this movie when you're like, this guy's kind of a sleazebag, like, he's kind of giving up his life, giving up his kid, giving up his wife, just so he can, like, catch this one guy. And so really at the end, there's really like a lack of a protagonist that you want to root for or connect with in this film. And it kind of feels empty. And in the end, you're just kind of like, well, okay, I don't really know if I honestly like either of these guys, but, you know, that was fun to watch. I do think it's hilarious at the end when Frank goes to trial and Richie's his defense attorney. That was fun to watch. Like, they've come full circle to where, like, one's being chased, the other's doing the chasing, they finally get caught, and he's like, hey, let me help you at least try to get out of this. And then he gets sentenced to 70 years, which is hilarious. It's like, well, maybe Richie's not that good of a lawyer, but I will say he only serves 15, so maybe he did do a good job. But yeah, I mean, it's a fun movie. Denzel's great, obviously. It's Denzel and Russell Crowe. I mean, they're two of the best actors in our lifetime, probably. And then the cast is insane. Again, like, I feel like Ridley just always has these insanely good casts. Like, you got Josh Brolin, another fantastic actor, John Hawkes, the RZA, like Cuba Gooding Jr., Common, Idris Elba. It's insane. So, I don't know. It's a good movie. It's a good biopic for sure. I would say it's one of the better biopics out there. If you ever want to check one out, check this one out. Cracking into the top 10 is blackhawkdown. I think this is the only war film that Ridley's ever done, right? I'm pretty sure it is. This is honestly, I would say from here up, I love all of these movies. This is one of my favorite war movies, probably of all time. I used to watch this so much when I was a kid. The action in this movie, it's unlike any other. It's so like immersive and frenetic, and I don't know, so many parts in this movie you feel like you're in the heat of the actual battle. It's filmed so well. The camera work, the cinematography, everything that Ridley did for this movie, it's visually, I think it's one of the more stunning war movies. It's up there for me with like the opening sequence of Saving Private Ryan. Like, that's what it feels like. Huge cast. I mean, this might be Ridley's most ridiculous cast he's ever assembled. You have Hartnett, Ewan McGregor, Tom Sizemore. God, I mean, Jason Isaacs. There's Tom Hardy before anyone knew who he was. This is probably like his first big movie he's ever done. You got Orlando Bloom, who, granted, falls off a helicopter in like the first 10 minutes, so he's not really in it that much, but it's still cool seeing him. Sam Shepard, rest in peace. Fantastic actor. Eric Bana, I mean, it's crazy. Jeremy Piven is in this. He's one of the pilots. And it's wild, dude. There's so many like actors before they were big that are in this movie. And you see their faces and you're like, holy shit, that's Tom Hardy. I don't even know how to explain. Blackhawkdown, I think, more than a lot of war movies, you feel the connectivity of the brotherhood between these soldiers. There's so many emotional moments in this movie, and so many moments that feel so tangible and so real. There are moments in this movie when you're like, oh, I forgot I was watching a movie. And it's insane, dude. It's insane what Ridley was able to do with this one event, because these true story war movies are hard, and it was just this single one event. It's not like this expansive, sprawling World War II epic. Like, this all takes place within like a 24, 36 hour period. It's all about, them going in to this city, one of their birds getting shot down, and then having to, execute a rescue mission. And that's it. But it's just so emotional. And like, even though you don't spend a lot of time with each individual character, you feel like you really, I think Ridley does a good job of helping you get to know each individual character. And like, he at least gives one character some interesting part of their personality to latch onto. And I would say this is probably one of the better ensemble cast films I've ever seen. Like I said, I love this movie, and I think it's visually incredible. What I will say, though, and what I do think hurts this movie, is how kind of chaotic it can be. And it even, nowadays, too, it even turns me off at some points, because there are times when it just gets so chaotic and, like, so fast-paced and kind of just, like I said, frenetic, that like you can't really tell who's who, and you can't really tell what's going on. Someone gets shot and you're like, okay, well, what character was that? I can't see anything because there's so much shit going on in the foreground. So I understand, like, that would totally turn some people off, because you're just like, I can't pay attention to all this. So I get it. Still a really good movie, and one of the best war films, in my opinion. In at number 9 is The Counselor. Look, I know that mainstream critics universally hate this movie. A lot of people do not like this movie. I really enjoy this movie. Look, it's Cormac McCarthy, right? He's responsible for, a lot of people would know, for writing the novel that No Country for Old Men is based off of, which is not only a top fiver for me, but I think it's one of the best modern westerns and one of the best movies made in the last 25 years, maybe even ever. He wrote this screenplay. It's not based on any of his work. He wrote it. I think the writing in this film is phenomenal. A lot of people get turned off by the dialogue. They think it's very weird. It's just awkward dialogue. If you've ever read any of his stuff, it fits him. And I like it. It's unique. It's different. It's different kind of dialogue you wouldn't expect out of a movie. I think a lot of people also go into this film with this misconstrued expectation that this movie is supposed to have a hero. That's not really Cormac McCarthy's style. I mean, if you've seen No Country for Old Men, there's not really, I mean, this movie is about people and the choices they make, and how there's consequences to those choices in life that you make. And that's, we follow Fassbender's character, who's, the titular counselor, who decides he wants to get in bed with the cartel. And then, of course, shit goes bottom up. People get screwed over, people die, and, that's fucking what happens when you enter a business like this. But the characters are fun. I mean, look, this movie has 3 of my all-time favorite actors in it: Javier Bardem, Brad Pitt, and Michael Fassbender. The casting's great. I think the acting's The acting's really good for the most part. There's some scenes where you can tell that like the talent's not really understanding the dialogue. But I have read that this movie kind of got off the ground in like a couple weeks. Like Ridley signed on and then they started shooting pretty much, is I think what happened. But the whole production, it went, as soon as it kicked off, it went really fast. So it seems like some troubles during filming. What I will say though, I think Cameron Diaz was insanely miscast for this role. I think her character was interesting, but I think some of what she does seems a bit ridiculous. And I think that is because of Diaz's performance. I think if you cast a more accomplished actress to take over this role, someone that does a lot of dramatic roles, maybe does insane, wild movies like this. I mean, Diaz is known a lot for comedic roles. I think if you cast somebody who has they have more foray into dramatic roles than Diaz does, maybe it doesn't come off as ridiculous. I mean, the whole like hoodwink she pulls in this movie, it seems so far-fetched at points, and it's just like, I don't know, I'm not even saying it would be like Amy Adams, but I think if you cast someone like an Amy Adams in this role, it would be more believable. And I think that is the biggest negative of this film. The other thing, people don't like how drab and dreary it is. I mean, it's pretty depressing when it all comes crashing down at the end. I don't mind it. I like movies like this. You know, like I said, No Country for Old Men is one of my favorite movies, and that does, you know, if you've seen that movie, it's a bummer. It is a bummer at the end, but this movie is the kind of thing I like. But I totally understand why it's not for a lot of people, maybe all people, honestly. In at number 8 is Gladiator 2. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because I just recorded a review for it on the channel. Go check it out if you want. It's good. It's a very entertaining movie. It's fun. It's a classic sweeping Ridley Scott epic. And, I mean, there's so much beauty in this film. Between the action sequences, the scenery, the set designs are insane. They're so impressive. The cinematography, like, it's all great. The performances, Pedro Pascal does fantastic, kind of taking over the spotlight from Russell Crowe. Denzel does a Denzel performance like you haven't seen in a long time out of him. He's phenomenal. There's a twist with his character. I'm not going to spoil it. And Pedro Pascal, obviously awesome. He's been on fire lately, and I think he's one of the more talented actors working today. Now, it does lack in the narrative department. It's a legacy sequel, so it's a lot like Jurassic World, Force Awakens. You kind of retread a lot of narrative beats from the old one, but there's within the context of the film, whenever you do see it, it makes sense how the story unfolds, and it makes sense, and it doesn't ruin the original, which is great, because I think a lot of times with these legacy sequels, it kind of, you watch them and you're just like, okay, well, this is kind of just like, at this point, just degrading what came before it. This does not do that. I will say too, this movie is sorely lacking in Russell Crowe, and I understand, like, Maximus died in the original. This movie's not really a fantasy, there's not really any supernatural elements to it. It's a straight up classical throwback Roman epic. So it feels weird if you were to bring that character back. I don't think it fits within the context of this universe that Ridley Scott established. But man, this is one of those movies when you understand what the difference is between a movie star and a very good actor, because Paul Mescal is a very, very, very good actor, and like I said earlier, he does fantastic in this role, taking over for Russell Crowe. But man, Russell Crowe in that original, and we'll talk about it, he owns every scene in that movie. And you can tell in this movie that there's not an actor in this cast that really does that. I mean, Denzel, of course, and you've seen Denzel in roles like that, but he's a supporting actor in this movie for sure. So it's not like he has the reins to kind of do whatever he wants. But other than that, it is a very fun, entertaining film, and I highly recommend it. In at number 7, and look, I know a lot of people are not going to like this, but number 7, we have Blade Runner. Look, I want to put this movie higher. I think this movie is incredible. I think it's very important in the history of cinema. It helped change sci-fi movies forever and what sci-fi movies could be. And just the whole theme and narrative of this film, it's all about what being human is, what it means to be human, and with these synthetics out there, like, when does it come to a point when we are less human and more robotic? I've always found kind of that idea, that theme, that concept very interesting and compelling to kind of mull over. And this movie, it does a fantastic job of that. Harrison Ford's great. I mean, it's Harrison Ford. He's awesome. He's fantastic in this film. The dark, brooding atmosphere, the grossness, the somberness of futuristic LA is great. It pretty much just looks like LA does now. No, I'm kidding. But it's good. I mean, visually, this and Alien, like, I mean, I wasn't alive then, but I feel like if you were watching Alien and then this, you could tell that Ridley Scott was going to be like one of the greatest visual directors out there. This world that he crafts and builds in this movie, it's great. I will say, though, the one drawback this movie has always had for me is the pacing. There are parts of this movie when it's very, very slow. And I enjoy slow movies, but with a movie like this, presenting such big themes and big ideas, you have to insert things to keep the audience entertained. And I just feel like the sequel, Blade Runner 2049, does a way better job of that. I enjoy this sequel more than I enjoy this one, but I still think this one is one of the best sci-fi movies ever made. None of the negatives I say should detract from that, because I still adore this movie. I also think there are parts in this movie when this is not unique to this movie either. This is still a problem in today's world of filmmaking and television production. There are parts of this movie that are way too dark. There are some portions where you cannot tell what the hell is going on, and that's a problem. And I get this was made in the 80s, so it sort of has an excuse, but does it? I don't know. Get better lighting is all I'm saying. In at number 6, just outside the top 5, is The Last Duel. I was genuinely surprised by this movie. I feel like when this came out, it had been a while since we had had a very, very good Ridley Scott movie. I feel like the last very good one before this was The Martian, and it had been a while since then. I didn't really have high expectations going in, because while this kind of fits in Ridley Scott's bag, it's this medieval kind of, it's not really an epic, but it's this medieval story, and he loves his medieval stories. But I'll be honest, I was of the opinion that maybe Ridley had kind of lost his touch when this movie came out. But I was, like I said, genuinely surprised, and I very much enjoy this movie. I enjoyed the performances. Matt Damon's a good actor, but it's always kind of like, can this dude actually play like someone in the medieval times? Does he have that kind of range? And he sort of does. Ben Affleck's hilarious. Like, every time he's on scene, you laugh because he looks ridiculous. He's not bad, though. Jodie Comer's amazing in this. She was relatively unknown to me. I know she was in that show. I can't think of the name of it right now, but I know she had got genuine, like, an insane amount of praise in whatever series that is. And then Adam Driver, like I said earlier in this ranking, he's one of the best actors working today, in my opinion. But the cool thing about this film, my favorite aspect of this film, and I think a lot of people recognize this, is how we go through this story from 3 point of views. So we spend time this is how this played out from Matt Damon's perspective. This is how this played out from Jodie Comer's perspective, and then Adam Driver. And even at the end, you never quite know what the actual factual story is. You never know what actually happened, and it kind of leaves you hanging on like, well, fuck. I don't know who to trust and I don't know who to believe. And it's compelling how it does that. And the final duel between Driver and Matt Damon, it's so emotional and just visceral, and it's great. Visually, again, it's Ridley Scott, so this movie's going to be fantastic. And it is. It's a fun movie. And I was happy to be proven wrong by it. I know a lot of people do not care for this movie, especially those who are giant Alien franchise fans. I love Prometheus, which is why it is the first movie to crack my top 5. This is probably going to seem blasphemous to some people, putting this over Blade Runner, but this movie is so entertaining, and it's the kind of movie that I love to revisit. And look, I would admit right off the bat, there's a lot of dumb scientists and astronauts in this movie doing dumb shit and making dumb decisions. That's fine. I don't care, because I think this movie is saved, 1, by its performances, 2, the visuals are insanely stunning, 3, the nature of the theme of this film about creation and the philosophical messaging that we get in this film. I love it. I always love sci-fi space films that deal with the existential. That's something I've kind of, dealt with my entire life. I've always been curious about that subject. It's always kind of rattled around in my brain. And it's just something that, is inherently interesting to me. And I think this movie nails it on that front. I mean, with Shaw, just, how much of a person of faith she is, even through all of this. Even at the end of the film, it's interesting to think about. Just, faith and life and death, and where do we come from and where do we go, and what's the purpose of all this, and immortality and things like that. I think subject matters like that are so interesting, and I think they're, for whatever reason, I just think they're very important to contemplate. And I think this movie does a great job at presenting that and presenting those ideas, especially from different sides. Now, I will agree, it kind of loses itself in the third act when it just turns into a full-fledged, action horror film. It is a little jarring, but I still enjoy it nonetheless. And man, that opening sequence with the engineers and, creating DNA on Earth, and I think that was so cool. It was a cool idea. And I think there's a lot of cool ideas in this movie. And I know some of the alien stuff feels like it was just kind of thrown in last second or just forced in, but I don't know, man. I've always loved this film, and I love rewatching it. I think it's so ridiculously entertaining. I like so many of the characters. Idris Elba's in it. He's always awesome. Another all-star cast by Ridley Scott. I said earlier, I think Naomi Rapace is one of the most underrated actresses working, and I stand by that. And then you have Charlize Theron, Guy Pearce, Michael Fassbender, incredible. I mean, the talent in this movie is awesome. And it's genuinely, I think, just a very entertaining film that I don't think has ever gotten enough credit for how deep and interesting its themes are. In at number 4 is Matchstickmen. I honestly don't know a lot of people who have actually seen this movie, but it's a very good movie, and if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend checking it out. So the basic premise is it's about con men. So Nicolas Cage and Sam Rockwell play a pair of con men, and then one day Nicolas Cage's estranged daughter wanders back into his life, and they start a relationship. They try to rekindle lost time, and there's a twist in the end. It turns out, I'm not going to spoil it, but there's a twist in the end. Nicolas Cage ends up getting conned himself by people he trusts, and turns his life around. It's one of these Ridley Scott movies, all the movies we talked about so far, none of them really have an uplifting ending. This one does. It is great. it's good in that way that, you know, Nicolas Cage plays this very interesting con artist. He's this very lonely man who lives a life of solitude because he has severe OCD and severe Tourette's. So he's not really a guy that goes out in public and enjoys life, but he makes a very good living. He has a beautiful home that he doesn't really share with anyone through just the cons that he pulls. And then his life starts to unravel because he wants to experience love. He wants to experience friendship. And then that kind of all gets taken from him. But in the end, he ends up becoming, you know, sort of an honest man and turning his life around, and he's happier for it. And it's an interesting film, especially with Cage's performance. Nicolas Cage is one of those actors that, like, you know, he's taken so many dumb, just insane, ridiculous roles in so many bad films just to pay off debt. But, like, this dude, when he's in a movie that he actually cares about and wants to do, like, the dude can act. He can act his ass off. And I feel like people forget that because of all the shitty roles he's had to take over the past, like, 20 years. But this, honestly, is one of my favorite Nicolas Cage performances. And it's number 4. It's one of my favorite Ridley Scott films. And it is very underrated in the pantheon of his movies. So if you haven't seen it, check it out. Number 3, The Martian. This movie's awesome. This is, I think, one of the better, I wouldn't even say this is sci-fi. I don't think it's not sci-fi, but like space movies, I guess, made over the past like 15 years. It's great. I mean, visually, obviously, it's Ridley Scott. The cast is fantastic. I lied earlier. This might be the best cast he's ever assembled. There's just like, you look around the room, it's like a who's who. And like, movies like this, a lot of this movie is dedicated to just Matt Damon and him just kind of mucking about on Mars. And it's hard. I feel like it's hard as an actor to like keep an audience entertained when it's just you and your set. And he does it. Like, Damon nails it in this movie. He's entertaining. He keeps you involved and just immersed in this narrative. And it's so cool watching how, like, the 3 teams, him and then the team at the space station and the team on the ground, all work together to try and solve, like, okay, we got to beat this clock. How are we going to get this guy home before he just, you know, runs out of what he needs to survive? And it's fun. It's just enjoyable to see how that unfolds. And, you know, I don't know how accurate this movie is scientifically. Most of it went way over my head because I'm not smart enough to figure that stuff out. But it is cool just seeing how they, like, solve these problems and, like, hatch these elaborate plans to try and get him off this desolate planet. And I also think this is probably one of my favorite space stations, like, in any space film. I think the space station is so cool. And I just always enjoyed films where, like, someone gets stuck in a shitty situation and they have to utilize whatever materials they have around them. And I don't know why. It's just always visually appealing to me watching an actor on screen, like, utilize the set around them to create things. And, like, Damon does that a lot in this movie. And it's just, this is a fun movie. You know, there's parts that are funny, they make you laugh. There's parts that'll make you emotional. There's very dramatic scenes. This movie kind of has it all. And I think it's honestly, it might be Ridley Scott's, like, most widely appealing film. And it just so happens to be one of his best, in my opinion. Coming in at number 2, Gladiator. We're almost there. Look, this one and the one after this, which if you've been watching this entire video, you know what number 1 is. It's not that hard to figure out. These two are bona fide masterpieces. And honestly, for me, they could switch places and go either way. These movies are tied, but I'm just putting Gladiator at 2. This movie's fantastic. It's a quintessential classic. Visually, it's incredible to watch. The battle sequences, the Colosseum fight sequences, live tigers, and they filmed with live tigers. It's insane to think about. And, like, the way that Ridley stages these sequences and builds these insane, elaborate, sprawling sets, and you get to see the Colosseum alive with audiences, and, like, it was so cool. You'd never really seen something like that on screen before. And then Maximus's story, this man just like serving the country, the city that he loves, and he's just ultimately betrayed by his own people and thrown into this just brutal life of like fighting and battle through the Colosseum. And he rises up and like leads these men to revolt, and he's not only fighting for these men that he's made brothers out of, but he's also fighting for the city and the future of it and the future of its people and the integrity of Rome's people. In that last scene when he gives his speech after killing Commodus and just asking the people to build a better city, to build a better government, to rise up and create a democracy, and then he finally just collapses and returns to his wife and child in the afterlife. It's beautiful. And Russell Crowe, I mean, dude just commands every single scene he's in this movie. It's something that the sequel lacks, even though I very much enjoy the sequel. But like this guy is what a movie star is supposed to be. He just encapsulates everything when he's on screen. When Russell Crowe is up there, you just like sit and watch, and you get lost in every single bit of dialogue he spouts out of his mouth. This movie is incredible, and it deserves to be recognized as Ridley Scott's second best film. Maybe best film. I don't know. It could go either way. It's a masterpiece. That's all I know. So, good on him. We finally got here. In at number 1 is Alien, another one of Ridley Scott's masterpieces. And you probably saw this coming a mile away, but this movie is incredible. It revolutionized what a close quarters horror movie could be, and even a sci-fi movie could be. I mean, this movie, I remember seeing it as a kid, scared the living shit out of me, and parts of it still terrify me today. And the tangible, just ridiculous special effects that were done for this film. You had never seen anything like it before. I mean, I could only guess. I was born in 1994, so how the fuck would I know? But everything visually, from the design of the ship to the design of the alien itself to just the grimy, just gross feel of this movie, and like this intimate small group of casts, like it just adds to this horror, like just claustrophobic atmosphere, and I love it. I love rewatching this movie, and I do enjoy the other Alien films, but none of them really ever recaptured just the magic of this movie. And Sigourney Weaver, my god, so good. One of the best female action heroes out there. People always say like, we don't have enough female action heroes, but like, dude, Sigourney Weaver just killing it for like 3 movies straight, and the third one's not even good. It's terrible. And Resurrections is terrible too, but I feel like she's always giving it her all in these movies. And it's just, I can't talk enough about this movie. Like, I know people who have just recently watched this for the first time. They're like, holy shit, I can't believe I have not been watching this my entire life, because it's just so good. You still get, like, to this day, I still jump at parts that I know are coming, and it's just like, man, this movie is incredible. And it's so insane to think about that this was one of Ridley Scott's like first 5 films. Like, this guy did like, I think 3 films maybe before this that I have never seen, and then he did this, and you're just like, this guy's career is about to take off. And sure enough, it did. But like, he really just like changed movies forever with this film. It's one of the best horror movies of all time, one of the best sci-fi movies of all time, one of the best movies full stop of all time, in my opinion. And it's Ridley Scott's best movie of all time.